Thank you so much for joining us on our news desk on QTV. In our headlines, the Food Reserve Agency has so far released up to 75,000 metric tons of maize to millers to help cushion the high meal prices in the country. The Rural Electrification Authority, REA, has targeted to electrify 15,195 rural households through its work plan for 2023. And armed robbers have snatched 80,000 kwacha cash from a Mufulira businessman meant for his workers' salaries. And other news in details. The Food Reserve Agency, FRA, has so far released up to 75,000 metric tons of maize to millers of the total 250,000 metric tons as a way of cushioning the high minimum prices in the country. Addressing the media, Agriculture Minister Reuben Mutolo-Piri says there is therefore no need for millers to claim that they have insufficient sale meal to exorbitant prices, giving them maize at a subsidized price of 4,000 per ton. Mr. Piri says the FRA has also been directed to monitor the operations at all millers benefiting from the subsidized maize and ensure they sell prices more for following the report.
90 millers have applied for 150,000 metric tons of maize from the Food Reserve Agency, FRA. The millers have applied to benefit from the 250,000 metric tons of maize which FRA is offloading to millers countrywide in a bid to cushion the escalating prices of meal. And Agriculture Minister Reuben Mutolo-Piri says the applications are being processed and so far 75,000 metric tons has already been released by FRA. He said this at a media briefing in Lusaka today.
As at beginning of this week, the agency had received from the 250,000, they had received about 130,000 metric tons worth of applications. They had received about 130,000 metric tons of applications. These are mere applications. Now, specific to your question, as at a day ago, the agency had offloaded about 75,000 metric tons of maize. These meaning Miller X put in a request and has paid, and we as FRA have given them a release order. So money has gone into a bank, confirmed that they have paid, and then you give a release order. With that release order, the miller is free to go and start collecting his maize. So these are actual effective demand, 75,000. So the answer to your question is, how much maize has been released? 75,000 metric tons.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Agriculture has disclosed that the ministry has reached 100% target of distribution of farming inputs under FISIP.
Soybeans and groundnuts. All of these inputs have basically been delivered to the different localities and farmers collecting them and have collected so much. As at the 25th, 26th, we were at 99.88%. The small fraction which is taken out for us to get 100 was because we just like any other activity where you're giving out things, you have to reconcile. So it's just reconciliation. But basically, we have delivered 100% of the fertilizer, 100% of the seed. The good news and most important news is that even our redeeming, the farmers coming to collect, is almost as good as 100%. And that makes us very, very happy.
Patricia Musongwa, QTV News.
The Rural Electrification Authority, REA, has targeted to electrify 15,195 rural households throughout its work plan for 2023. REA has a total of 1.97 billion kwacha as available funds for 2023 projects, of which over 743 million kwacha is an allocation from the 2023 national budget. 1 million kwacha from each constituency's CDF allocation, with other funds coming from cooperating partners. Speaking during a media briefing on the 2023 work plan for Rural Electrification Authority in Lusaka, REA Chief Executive Officer Linus Chanda says the electrification of over 15,000 rural households will represent 10% cumulative increment on the access rate, putting the authority on the firm direction towards its 2026 target. Mr. Chanda says under the work plan, grid development projects have been allocated 361,900,000 kwacha, representing 43.6% of REA's 2023 capital budget. He says it's REA's desire that this allocation will translate into 62 new projects targeting 65 growth centers, which will in turn result in at least 12,000 connections. Mr. Chanda adds that renewable energy off-grid projects have been allocated approximately 190,800,000 kwacha, representing 23.8% of REA's 2023 budget.
Commence implementation of our 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. Through this strategic plan, we are anxious to innovate and implement strategic thinking, which should result in achievement of government's aspirations, which have motivated the increased budgetary allocation. Our revised strategic plan is a critical guide to the attainment of government's aspirations of universal access to electricity by 2030 by all. We remain committed to aggressively meet this challenge that government expects from REA by implementing our plans through 4 strategic themes, namely strategic partnerships and client services as number 1, resource mobilization as number 2, sustainable rural electrification service delivery as number 3, and human capital development as number 4. Members of the press, allow me to outline our work plan in board terms and budget, which we intend to implement this year. First, we will execute grid development projects amounting to 361,900,000 kwacha. 361,900,000 kwacha. Grid development projects include grid extension projects, grid intensification projects, and grid densification projects.
And Mr. Chanda says 156 million kwacha has been allocated towards rural electrification projects under the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. He says this will result in the electrification of public institutions throughout the country, such as schools, health centers, magistrate courts, and chiefs' palaces.
By implementing our plans through 4 strategic themes, namely strategic partnerships and client services as number 1, resource mobilization as number 2, sustainable rural electrification service delivery as number 3, and human capital development as number 4. Members of the press, allow me to outline our work plan in board terms and budget, which we intend to implement this year. First, we will execute grid development projects amounting to 361,900,000 kwacha. 361,900,000 kwacha. Grid development projects include grid extension projects, grid intensification projects, and grid densification projects. At another fora, or indeed after this, I can explain, or indeed my colleagues from REA can explain the meaning of this. But in short, this money will be directed towards connecting those communities that we should connect to the ZESCO network.
Armed robbers have stolen 80,000 kwacha cash from Mufulira businessman whom they attacked outside his home. Copperbelt Police Commanding Officer Piswo Mwemba said Bandani Mbewe, age 68, of house number 8, Liemba Avenue in Mufulira, was attacked by 7 criminals armed with pistols. Mr. Mwemba said the criminals got away with 80,000 kwacha meant for Mr. Mbewe's workers, his cell phone worth 150 and a wristwatch worth 65 kwacha. He said the incident happened on 30th January 2023 at around 20:40 hours. Mr. Mwemba explained that Mr. Mbewe is reported to have withdrawn money amounting to 80,000 kwacha from the bank, which was meant for his workers' salaries, but since it was late, he decided that he would pay them the following day. He later passed through Mufulira Hotel to check on his business and later went home with the money around 20 hours. The money was kept in a bag under the driver's seat. Mr. Mwemba said the victim arrived home and his security guard, Collins Mwansa, age 52, opened the gate for him, and as he was about to enter the yard, he was attacked by about 7 unknown criminals who hit the guard with a crowbar on the head, causing him to sustain a deep cut. He says the criminals later rushed to the complainant, who was driving a Nissan hardbody, registration number ABA 5196, and pointed a pistol to his head and started searching the vehicle before getting away with the bag containing the money, a phone and a wristwatch. Petroda Zambia Limited workers have downed tools following the failure by management to effect new salary increments. The workers who staged a peaceful protest at Petroda service station on Mumbwa Road in Lusaka told Q News that they have failed to reach an agreement with management, especially on the payment of the new salaries, which are in line with the new minimum wage and gratuities. They have vowed not to report back for work if their grievances are not addressed, further calling on the Labour Office to intervene. The workers, who include fuel attendants and drivers, among others, explained that they are paid 1,900 kwacha instead of 2,900 kwacha and are further subjected to long hours of work, while management has also stopped providing them with safety boots. Efforts to get a comment from the company's human resources personnel, only identified as Mr. Banda, proved futile. A 9-year-old girl has died after drowning in a sewer pond while playing with her peers in Chipata District, Eastern Province. Eastern Province Police Deputy Commanding Officer Lucky Mukondia says the incident happened on Sunday around 15 hours in Hillsview compound and identified the girl as Trisha Kabwenga. Speaking to Zanis in an interview, Ms. Mukondia said the victim's mother, Martha Nakazwe, aged 35, reported the drowning of her child. She says police rushed to the scene and upon arrival found that officers from the fire brigade had already retrieved the body. Ms. Mukondia says brief facts are that the deceased was playing near the pond with 2 other friends of the same age when she sank in the weeds covering the sewer water, thinking it was on land. She narrated that the body of the miner is expected to be put to rest. The Lusaka Central Business District has continued to be characterized with uncollected garbage amidst a cholera outbreak in the country. On Saturday, Vice President Mutalina Lumango launched the Lusaka Cleaning and Drainage Cleaning Campaign that saw the cleaning of streets in the Central Business District following a cholera outbreak in Bugwe District of Eastern Province, where one person has so far died. However, a spot check by QTV this afternoon found heaps of garbage mixed with stagnant rainy water in selected parts of the Central Business District. And the Network for Young People Against Violence says that upholding high standards of sanitation in Lusaka hinge on the sustained collaboration between stakeholders and local authority to ensure the prevention of any outbreak of diseases such as cholera. Executive Director Moses Kalonde says it is disappointing that it had to take the Vice President to get involved for the Lusaka City Council to clean up the Central Business District.
The Central Business District must be clean, especially that we are in the middle of the rain season where it is raining dogs and cats. We don't want to have a situation where we start dealing with issues of cholera. You all know that prevention is better than cure. Why don't we prevent diseases such as cholera even before it breaks out? It's cheaper for us, it's cheaper for the local authority, it's cheaper for the central government. When you go that route, it simply means that we are saving the monies that otherwise we should be spending unnecessarily. We wish to call upon the City Council to rise up to the challenge, to pull up their socks. Of course, the Council alone cannot maintain the cleanliness of the town. Ourselves, the citizens, must be responsible enough. We shouldn't be throwing garbage in undesignated places or areas. We must be responsible enough
that some roads become deplorable even before they reach their design period. Ms. Mutembo states that to enhance the quality of roads, the agency is looking at this matter actively, adding that all the key stakeholders have been engaged. The news reports that the RDA Acting Chief Executive Officer said this at Parliament buildings when she made a submission to the Committee on Transport, Works and Supply, who wanted to know why some roads get deplorable before their design period. Ms. Mutembo states that recently the agency had a meeting with the Association of Consulting Engineers and the Engineering Institute of Zambia, AIZ, where the matter was addressed. She says preemptive action will be taken on contractors doing shoddy works going forward. The Health Professions Council of Zambia, HPCZ, has implored people in the health business to formalize their businesses with the council. HPCZ Public Relations Manager Terry Msonda says the registration process for both individuals and facilities is very user-friendly and straightforward, hence there is no need for practitioners in such facilities to use shortcuts and conduct business illegally. Mr. Msonda says the council will continue to ensure there is sanity in health sectors and consumer is protected from wrong practices in the health sector. And Mr. Msonda has told Q News in an interview that the council, working with the Zambia Police, has apprehended a Zambian national identified as Collins Mumba, who was representing himself to the public as a medical doctor specialized in skincare. He says the suspect did not have any license from HPCZ and his facility did not equally have any documentation from HPCZ to support its establishment.
Health Professions Council of Zambia, we have shut down an illegal clinic specialized in skin in Lusaka, and we have also apprehended the owner in collaboration with the Zambia Police. Now it is alleged that this Zambian national by the name of Collins Simunda was presenting himself to the public as a medical doctor specialized in skin issues without any registration with HPCZ. And that's not all. even his facility equally did not have any legal documentation from HPCZ to support its establishment. So this is very contrary to the provisions of HPCZ. In particular, if you look at section 16, section 6, 15 and 36, which talks about the legal provisions of having all the documentation for one to operate as a practitioner and also one to establish a facility. And to that effect, as HPCZ, through the police, we will have this person apprehended. As I speak, he is currently before the police. And we want to also state here and emphasize that notwithstanding the qualification of any cadre of health practitioner, they need to have the necessary licensing for both themselves and the facility. And those who may have such facilities, I think it's high time they came to formalize the legal existence of those facilities.
Decisive Minds Executive Director Kennedy Mutale says Zambia is sitting on a time bomb following the high rate of substance abuse among young people. Decisive Minds is an NGO whose core business is providing integrated therapeutic services to members of the general public challenged with mental health related concerns. Mr. Mutale states that if this is not addressed by government and other stakeholders, young people will continue being drowned in substance abuse. He notes that most of these youths are doing this out of frustration due to unemployment despite completing their tertiary education. Mr. Mutale says government should find means and ways of managing these young people who have become a threat to the innocent citizens. He tells Q News that parents have also a role to play in ensuring that they take care of their children and help them to become better members of society.
Most of them have found some kind of solace, from drinking alcohol, from using different substances so that maybe they can cope with their dire situation. But also, the other aspect is the parents themselves. I think the parents also should play a greater role in trying to help their children. No matter how much they are abusing these substances, they still need to support their children so that, the children should have at least, where they can lean on. Because, for example, if you are home, you are lambasted by parents. When you go out there, you find yourself, because of the stress, because also of what you have been, subjected to from home, maybe from your siblings, your parents, and then other relatives, you find that people are getting more and more stressed because of the abuse. So as a result, most of them, they can't cope, they go into misusing of substances. So what we're trying to say is, in terms of intervention, we need to have a greater sensitization, a national sensitization program that can help so that they could awareness creation, but also to create demand, for services that might, be on offer. We know that there is Chainama as one of the biggest facilities that can accommodate, those that are struggling with substances. But we also have some private facilities that offer, rehabilitative programs as well. But they are very few and they cannot accommodate, the mileage or the bigger numbers of people that are currently struggling.
Motorists in Northern Province have expressed concern over the state of the Kasama-Mbala-Mpulungu Road. Bernard Sichinga, 32, of Senga District, told Zanis in an interview that the roads need urgent attention before lives are lost. Mr. Sichinga noted that motorists are now spending more than 4 hours covering a distance of 165 kilometers between Kasama and Mpulungu. He added that the wear and tear of vehicles has also increased. Mr. Sichinga has since appealed to the Road Development Agency RDA to work on the potholes and safeguard the lives of people. And Chief Nondo said that the bad state of the Kasama-Mbala-Mpulungu Road is worrying to motorists and other road users. The traditional leader has since called on government to expedite the patching of potholes, especially on the stretch between Chomba and Masamba areas, which is the worst affected. He disclosed that the road is of economic value to the nation and it connects the country to the Great Lakes region through the Mpulungu port. When contacted for a comment, Northern Province Minister Leonard Mbao said the government is aware of the challenges motorists are facing. Mr. Mbao said the Road Development Agency RDA is currently conducting routine pothole patching to alleviate the challenges road users are facing. To end the news, we now join DW with a roundup of international news.
Wednesday is World Hijab Day, and organizers hope this will foster better understanding for women who choose to wear the garment. Today on DW News Asia, we're looking at how polarizing this one item of clothing is. In Iran, for instance, hundreds of thousands of women protested last year against its mandatory wearing in the country. Conversely, in India, Muslim students protested for the right to wear a hijab in their classrooms. The protests in the southern state of Karnataka last year began after a government ban. India's Supreme Court still needs to decide on the matter, but for many Muslim students in the country, it's a matter of personal choice.
Rida Mobin is getting her master's in communication at Jamia Millia Islamia University in Delhi. She started wearing the hijab about 7 years ago and is one of 3 women in her class who do so. She believes that women across the world, irrespective of their religion, should have the right to choose what they want or don't want to wear. Rida says people often stare at her, but that she has gotten used to it.
It wasn't something that came to me through family. It was something that I discovered and chose. So at the moment that I decided I was going to wear a hijab, I think that moment it became a part of my identity. It became a part of who I was.
Last year, the southern state of Karnataka saw major protests both for and against the hijab after 6 students were barred from attending classes for wearing one. Officials shut down schools and universities for days because they feared violence. Following the controversy, the Karnataka High Court upheld the ban on hijabs in classrooms, stating that the hijab is not essential to Islam. Later, when the matter reached the Supreme Court, it delivered a split verdict. Rida often talks about the tensions in Karnataka with her friend Naila, who also wears the hijab. Both say that the controversy had nothing to do with the hijab per se. Instead, it was about patriarchy and men wanting to control women's choices, as well as with rising Islamophobia in India. Naila says she does not think women wear the hijab because the men in their lives force them to. They do so because of their faith, and this is their right. But she and Rida are both against the forceful imposition of hijab.
You can obviously owe it a lot to the Western media, news media in general, which has always portrayed a hijabi woman as oppressed. A person who wears a hijab is often seen as somebody who doesn't have their own opinions, somebody who doesn't have their own agency, and who is governed by what the men in their life says.
Rida agrees. She has vowed to take legal recourse if someday she is told to remove her hijab.
I know a friend of mine who was refused a job offer. The condition for the job was she had to remove her hijab, and unfortunately she had to leave it. We need to create inclusive societies, inclusive workplaces where everyone, people from all cultures are accepted and all identities and identical markers are accepted.
Both Naila and Rida struggle with prejudice every day, whether it is from an individual stare or a national debate. But their struggle has only strengthened their beliefs and the feeling of empowerment they say the hijab has given them.
And joining me now from Delhi for more context is award-winning journalist and commentator Simi Pasha. Simi, the hijab debate in India, is it around the question of oppression versus empowerment, or is it something else?
Videsh, it's actually a very complicated issue as far as India is concerned. In Iran, on the other hand, you have an Islamist regime asking Muslim women to necessarily wear a hijab. In India, on the other hand, there are a group of women who want to wear a hijab. And the Hindu nationalist government has banned wearing of hijabs in schools in Karnataka. It actually started last February with a group of 6 girls in a pre-university college in Udupi in Karnataka. They were barred from entering their classrooms while wearing a hijab. The school administration said when entering the classroom, they have to remove their hijab. And the girls said that they're wearing it because they don't want to come without the hijab in front of men. And some of the teachers were male teachers. And the standoff continued and it grew. And then it actually became a matter of choice. So the girls were forced to choose between their right to receive an education, which is a fundamental right in India, versus their right to practice their religion, which is also a fundamental right, and the right to wear what you want to wear, which is, I think, a basic right that every individual in the world should enjoy. The state actually has no right to enter anybody's wardrobe.
But then, Simi, sorry to interrupt you. I'm really sorry I'm interrupting you, Simi. But then the High Court, the Karnataka High Court said in this matter that hijab isn't essential to Islam. Why do the students have a problem accepting that?
So, Brijesh, it's not about, it's not whether the practice of wearing a hijab is essential to the practice of Islam or not. It's whether the girls, why are they being forced to choose between practicing a religious belief that they believe is essential and their right to basic education. In fact, the order of the Karnataka High Court was also challenged in the Supreme Court, which then delivered a split verdict that came in October last year. So basically, one of the dissenting judges, one judge said that the Karnataka High Court was right in continuing with the ban imposed by the state of Karnataka. The other judge, Justice Hulia, said that India is a mature secular democracy. As long as there is a religious practice which doesn't harm anyone's sentiments, there is no harm in continuing with it. Why force the students to choose between wearing a hijab and receiving an education? That's a direct violation of a fundamental right that the Constitution of India guarantees. So it may not be an essential practice of Islam, as one of the judges said. But there are religious experts who believe that it is a fundamental practice. But you may not. You can debate on that. My point is that you cannot force the girls to choose between wearing something that they think is essential to their practice and their beliefs and their right to receive an education.
Is politics making the girls have to decide between their education and their religious practice?
Absolutely. And it's such a shameful thing because what happened in Karnataka last year was that these young girls may have been like 14 or 15. They were harassed. They were barred from entering their classrooms because the school administration thought that it was not proper of them to wear the hijab. What happened in Udupi in Karnataka at that time was that these Hindu fundamentalist groups entered that political stage. They distributed saffron shawls to Hindu boys and girls. So there was a standoff inside the school campus. You're basically politicizing and communalizing classrooms in India. You had teenagers who were fighting literally a pitched battle on religious grounds, which was a very sad day as far as the education system in India is concerned and the Indian politics is concerned. To make politics so dirty that you're engaging teenagers into it and forcing them to make a choice. You had a teenage girl wearing a burqa being heckled by a group of boys, and she turned around and said Allahu Akbar, and that Allahu Akbar, I remember, had become such a big news issue that a cry which actually Allahu Akbar means Allah is the greatest. But it's also seen as a war cry in some cultures. It became problematic in that Allahu Akbar was seen as an expression of fundamentalism, which is not the case. If she's being heckled, how is a lonely girl and there's also a threat of sexual violence, I feel, which is so much present when you have a single teenager, 15-year-old, being surrounded by a group of 20 boys wearing saffron shawls and heckling her. How else is she supposed to respond? It's a very difficult situation, and it's really sad these girls have been put at the center of national politics.
You talked about choice, Simi. Isn't it also true that it isn't always a matter of personal choice? There are communities in India in which girls are forced to wear the hijab. Isn't that also true?
So, Besh, you are right. I mean, there's no black and white as far as this is concerned. But my only point is that, of course, there are women who choose to wear a hijab. I recently did a piece for an Indian magazine where I interviewed 5 women, including an architect, a journalist, another media person, and a housewife. And they said that they had chosen to wear the hijab. They were the first people in their family to start wearing a hijab. And there was a lot of opposition that they received from their colleagues, from society in general. One woman said that her neighbors didn't speak to her and didn't acknowledge her presence. In fact, one of the lawyers this girl was a lawyer. She said she was forced to stop wearing the hijab because she was scared that her 1-year-old,
For most, the bottom line of elite football comes down to